Let's get started. We are on 23 B1, Chaf Gimel Amud Bet. We are starting a new Mishnah. The way it's divided at this part of the Perek is usually pretty convenient in terms of the bite-size issues that you cover from the Mishnah to the Gemara, and then you have one whole piece, and that's kind of a takeaway. You don't need to have been part of the one before in order to kind of catch the next one. So it's very good in that way. Let's read the Gemara. The Gemara says as follows. En porsin al shema. Pores means over here not to cover. Okay, sometimes pores means to cover, but over here pores means to take like prusa. Al menat lekabel pras. It says in the Mishnah in Avot. Pras means a piece. So we do not break Shema into pieces. We'll see what that means in just a second. Ve'en ovrin lifnei teva. I'm just going to want to take you through it. And you don't have a chazan go up to the teva. Ve'en nosin et kapehem, and the kohanim don't lift their hands. Ve'en korim b'torah. You don't read the Torah. Ve'en maftirim and avin. You don't read the haftarah. Ve'en nosin ma'amad u'moshav. You don't stand and sit during a funeral procession. Ve'en omrim birkat avelim, and you don't do the blessings that you do for a avel. V'tanchumei avelim, and the mourning, the comforting of the mourners. Ubirchat chatanim, and the blessings you make for a chatan, i.e. under the chuppah, or at the end of Birkat HaMazon, at the end of Birkat HaMazon for the first 7 days. Ve'en mezamnim b'shem, and you don't make zimun using God's name. Pachot me'asara. Now, I just wanted to charge through to get to those two words. So this whole Mishnah is really telling you the law of Pachot me'asara, that there's certain things that we only do with a minyan. And if you don't have a minyan, you don't do them. So now let's go back to the beginning of the Mishnah. We'll go back case by case, explain what each thing is. But again, the point of this Mishnah, the focal point is all of these things need a minyan. So we've had numerous Mishnayot that did this, right? Mishnayot that told us that you only read a Torah, this amount of readers. You only read if you have this many Pesukim. So each time it's giving us a halacha, and once it gives you the halacha, so then it expands the halacha out to other cases that are not necessarily megilla related. So says the Mishnah. The Mishnah says, En porsin al shema. What does that mean? Let's say, as an example, you had a bunch of people that were in shul and they did not have a minyan. So there's 6 guys, 8 guys, doesn't matter how many guys. They're praying and they did not have a minyan for shachari. What do? You ever have that where you go to shul, there's no minyan? It's funny, it's not really so much like part of our existence anymore. But I remember my whole childhood was filled with this. Yeah, there was a minyan and deal in the winter. Okay, my father would send me to go get people from their houses. I would literally go and knock on people's doors from the age of 5, 6 years old. Okay, so you have a bunch of people sitting there, and you might not have a minyan. Anyway, what do? You pray like a yachid. So let's say you prayed from the beginning. You did the berachot. You did Baruch Shamar, Ashrei. You did Yishtabach. Now you come to the berachot of Kriyat Shema. You supposed to stop or you read?
Read.
You're allowed to read the berachot without a minyan, right? So you read all the berachot of Kriyat Shema without a minyan. You read Shema, or no? Yes or no? Yeah. You do Amidah? Yes or no? Yes. That's how you do that. Even if you're praying by yourself with one person. Now you finish praying. All of a sudden, 4 more guys walk in. Oh, it's 8 o'clock. I thought it was 8:30. Yani. Yeah. Okay. What do you do now? So the halacha is that you go back and there's things that you cover in order now that you have a minyan. So as an example, you could say Kaddish. These guys that are catching up, they could say Baruch Hu, and everyone answers Baruch Hu. I don't know if you've ever had that. I've had that many times. Or people just come late. Even if everyone else did the minyan already. They do Baruch Hu, then they do Kedusha, right? They say the Kedusha of Nakdishach in the Amidah.
They go from Baruch Hu straight to...
Yeah, they're praying. No, they're praying regular. Okay. So the Gemara says, the Mishnah says, Porsim et Shema. In a case like this, what do? You break Shema. What does breaking Shema mean? When the guy says Baruch Hu, what does the word literally mean? Baruch Hu et Amunai HaMevorach. Bless Hashem, HaMevorach, who is blessed. So what does that require the people to do? Literally, bless God. What would happen if the people didn't say anything? They didn't do anything. They just listened to the guy say, Baruch Hashem Mevorach. They would not have blessed God, correct? Because he's calling to them to bless God. So the Gemara right now is operating with the idea that after a person says Baruch Hu, what do you need to do? Answer. But how do you answer bless God? By saying a blessing. See, for us, most of us, our response to Baruch Hu Taman Baruch is Baruch Hanam Baruch Navaed. But there are opinions that say that's only like a mini response. What's the real response to Baruch Hu? The first blessing of Kriyat Shema. Yotzer HaMeorot. So you said bless God, so what do? I bless God. But I already prayed. So would I have to say both blessings? Or would I say only the first one in response to your Baruch Hu? So that's what Porsin et al Shema means. So if someone comes in, now there's 10 guys, what would happen? You say Kaddish, you say Baruch Hu, and I respond to you with the first blessing of the Amidah. So the Mishnah is telling us, but you can't do that with 9 people. You need a minyan. The second thing we said is, and ovrin lefnei teva. What does that mean? You don't have a chazan do chazara, repeat the Amidah with less than 10. Which, by the way, is a very good question. Why should that be? What's the purpose of chazara?
The other people who couldn't pray. The people who couldn't pray.
You have someone who doesn't know how to pray, so you have a shaliach tzibur, he's doing the Amidah. And everyone else would fulfill the obligation with the chazan. That's how it used to be. They didn't have books. People didn't know some of them. So what happened? The chazan.
Why is even chazara? Why isn't it just B'kol Ram?
So that's literally the question. Normally, the reason why they instituted that was in order to make sure. So we had a prayer in quiet, and then the chazan would go over it again. Why? Because you can't compare his prayer to your prayer. You're praying for your own personal things. Maybe I ticked the box of prayer by fulfilling my obligation with him, but I didn't pray for the things I wanted to pray for. So that's not the same thing. Also, there's a lack of understanding sometimes in the chazan and in the people for what it means that you have to have in mind to fulfill the obligation with him, with other one. Let's say you're sitting here, he's praying, now you're talking to Harry. You just broke the Amidah. Can't do that. So during Chazara. Okay. Let's say you were being Yotzeh with him.
Okay.
But now you did a hefsek and you broke the thing. Another example. Let's say the Chazan was not careful to say every word out loud. And you missed words, you mumbled some words, you lost it. So you see, there's so many different things that have to go right in order to be Yotzeh with Chazan. So therefore, we don't want you being Yotzeh with Chazan lechatechila. But b'di'evid, what if the guy can't read? He has no other choice. So that we institute chazara. So by that logic, it makes sense that, let's say there's 8 people. Doesn't it make sense that one of them should say the Amidah out loud? So that out of the other 7 guys, if one of them doesn't know how to pray, he's yotzeh. So in other words, we do chazara halacha now that we know, we do it only when there's a minyan. But the question is, why do we do it only when there's a minyan? Technically, it would have been possible and logical to do it even if there's only a few people. However, the Mishnah says, en ovrim lefnei teva. So you do not do chazara unless there's tuvein osid kapehem. The kohanim do not do birkat kohanim unless there's a minyan. Ve'en korim b'torah. We don't take out the Torah for 8 people. Ve'en maftirim b'navi. You don't do haftarah. Same thing. Ve'en osim ma'amad u'moshav. You don't do a ma'amad u'moshav. What's ma'amad u'moshav? We don't do this today. What they used to have is when someone would pass away. So we do a little bit of this. Do you ever notice in the levaya, people walk and then they stop. And then they continue walking. After the car, stop. Stop again. They do 7 stops on the way when they do accompanying someone who passes away. What was the original version of that? Not just doing Mizmor Tehillim of Yoshev B'Seter each time they would move and stop, but rather the whole funeral was done that way. They would tell everybody, okay, all you, the Yikarim, all the dear ones, sit. They would sit, they would do a eulogy. Everyone would be crying. Then they would say, okay, stand. They would walk with the person who passed away. Sit. Everyone would sit. They would continue with the eulogy. Imagine you did like a moving funeral. Sorry, my dad joke. That funeral was very moving. Okay. Then We gotta cut that one out, right? So you don't do that process if there's no minyan. You don't say the bracha for the avelim. Sorry? So it's very interesting, because take a look for Rashi. Rashi says, Mefaresh b'Gemara. The Gemara is already going to describe what it means. Now, when you look at the Gemara, we'll see exactly what the Gemara assumes Birkat Avelim is. We'll get to that in just a minute, right? But there's a few things that it could have been. It could be Birkat Avelim. It could be the blessing that you make when you hear that someone passed away. There's a few berachot that could be referring to. So Rashi just says, you know what? I'm not gonna tell you what it is. I want you to see in the Gemara. A lot of times when Rashi is telling you that, what he's trying to tell you is, don't make an assumption over what you think this is referring to. Okay? Birkat avelim, v'tanchumei avelim, and comforting the mourners. So what is the comforting the mourners? Comforting the mourners is when they would make, at the end of the funeral, they make two lines, and the mourners pass between, and they say to them, Tenuchamu min hashamayim, or if you're Ashkenaz, hamakom yanachem etechem b'toch sha'ar v'leitzom Yerushalayim. So they would say statements of comfort. Again, all of these things, you need a minyan. Birkat chatanim, you could only do Sheva berachot under the chuppah if you have 10 men. Now, you don't think that that's so relevant, because most weddings will have hundreds of men. But
100 minyanim.
You can have 100 minyanim, except that, think about a second marriage. Sometimes people will want to do it smaller. And then you have to tell them, we need 10 men. And it's not always, you shouldn't always take for granted that there's going to be people there. Sometimes people will ask me, Rabbi, we want to do it very, very small. We want to get married in a rabbi's office. There's this myth that you get married in the rabbi's office.
Your office doesn't take anyone.
My office, we couldn't have a minyan anyway, right? But it's a little too small. But the idea, the concept, getting married in the rabbi's office is ridiculous. Why? Number one, you need witnesses. Number two, if you want to have Shev Berachot, you need 10 people. What would happen if you did a wedding with 2 witnesses, with no minyan? It would still be a wedding, but there will be no Shev Berachot. Okay? So Birkat, we're learning over here. So Birkat Chatanim requires 10 people. Ve'en mezamnim. So, and also, by the way, for a Sheva Berachot, a lot of weddings, they party the night away. Now comes Sheva Berachot from the wedding meal. Mm-hmm. Who's left? Parents, right, Zan puts a parent. Parents, grandparents, immediate family. Most friends already are ditched, by the way. Unless you ask them to stay. Most people, they're ditching. I know, because I was once called to go back to a wedding because they didn't have a minyan of men.
Because you ditched?
Sorry?
Because you ditched.
I wasn't a friend. I'm the rabbi. I'm supposed to ditch. I always say, they have the rabbi dance with only the men dancing. So I said, it's usually it's go hard or go home, right? But by rabbis, it's go hard and go home. Right? Okay. Ve'en mezamnim b'shem pachot ma'asara. What does that mean? You could either say nevarech shachan mishlo. How many people you need for that? 3. Nevarech Elokeinu shachan mishlo is 10. So you mezamen b'shem with 10 only. Now the Gemara says 2 other things which are arcane, obtuse, veit, like they would say in Yiddish, not things that normally come up, but bekarkaot tishav kohen ve'adam ki yoseh bahen. Let's say a person says, I'm going to sanctify this, I want to give this property, the value of this property, I want to give it to the Beit HaMikdash. Okay? Who decides the value of that property?
Appraiser.
Right? So, but how do you appraise legally in Jewish law when it comes to the Beit HaMikdash? You need an appraisal team of 9 people and 1 kohen. Fascinating. So the appraisal team is a team of 10 people, and they decide the value of the real estate. That way different people are coming at it from different angles. They understand it, they want to understand it properly, okay? But there's also another instance where a person doesn't sanctify the value of the building to the Beit HaMikdash, but they do their own erkaot. The erech, arachin, means the value of. It's a whole masechet called arachin, the value of. Let's say a person says, I'm dedicating my value to the Beit HaKnesset. Guy gets in an accident, he feels like he owes God his life. God, the value of my life, I'm dedicating to the Beit HaKnesset. What's that value?
That's a monetary donation.
That's a monetary donation. You're donating to the Beit to the Mikdash.
But is that the value after the accident or before the accident? I know it's
were
not on
less or
topic,
more,
but
right.
I'm,
Maybe
you know,
No,
It's a good question.
Because
Good
you
question.
can't walk. What's your value at that point? It's
you
diminished.
probably can't work or not, whatever, depending. But
Good question. Is it an arbitrary amount or is it something which is decided for everybody? If it was an amount that was decided for everybody, you wouldn't need a evaluating team, right? Now, so there's a little bit of a question that we have to answer because the pasuk actually mentions specific amounts for specific ages. A man between this age and this age, a woman between this age and this age, and it gives different values for each of them. Basically, the idea was decided on what value could you bring at the slave market,
Yeah, exactly. That's what it sounded like, slave market.
right? So simple, keep it simple. Now, that terminology sounds a little bit crazy to us, but let's just change one word. What value could you bring on the job market? Because that's really your monetary value. No one is going to decide that the depth of your amazing heart ray is worth something in dollars and cents. But what we're saying is, I'm talking about a physical, monetary, financial value. What is my financial value? The amount of financial worth I bring through the various possibilities I have of working. And that will be decided on a job market, okay? Let's carry on, okay? So far the Mishnah has listed a whole bunch of things. If you could imagine, what's the Gemara now going to do? The Gemara is going to analyze and try and figure out exactly why all of these halachot are true and why they need a minyan. Mina hanimili, says the Gemara. Amar Rabbi Chia bar Abba. How do we know this halacha? Rabbi Chia bar Abba says, in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, the Abba Krak, as the pasuk says, V'nikdashti b'toch b'nei Israel, and I will become sanctified b'toch b'nei Israel. Now, there's two things I want you to pay attention to: the word b'toch, the word b'nei Israel. Okay. So God says, I will be sanctified amongst the Jewish nation or the Jewish people. Says the Gemara, what do we learn from here? If God says, I will be sanctified amongst the Jewish people, kol davar shebekdusha, any object which is a matter of holiness, lo yeh pachot me'asara, you can't do it unless you have 10. Okay? Because it says, let's deal with the loose interpretation at this point of the Gemara. And I will be sanctified amongst the Jewish people. That means the Jewish people is 10. We don't know yet how we know that means 10, right? But God says, I will be sanctified amongst the Jewish people. So anytime you're coming to do something which involves the sanctification of God, that happens amongst the Jewish people, and that is 10. The Gemara says, "My mashma, who told you that amongst the Jewish people is 10?" The Tani Reb Chia explains this is going to be a double-barrel gzera shava. What is a gzera shava? Let's review. Gzera shava means a word which is here and here. Okay, so if, as I say, in a contract you would say, hereafter referred to as. So if I find a place where the word monies refers to the payout of blah, 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 blah. So anytime I find that word in the contract, monies, that's what it means. Gzera shava works in a similar way, okay? If I find one place where I have a definitive value, understanding, commitment, qualitative distinction that classifies what that word means, if I find that word in another place, the Misorah tells us, learn this Gzera shava, learn from here to here. So we have two Gzera Shavas operating, holding hands. The first Gzera Shava, bear in mind, is Toch. K'tivach, it says over here, and I will become sanctified betoch, amongst Bnei Israel. What does it mean to be amongst? Uchtivatam, and also says over there, Hibadelu mitoch ha'edah. Separate yourselves, mitoch, from amongst ha'edah, the gathering. Okay? Now, if you see amongst over here and amongst over here, whatever amongst meant over here, which is referring to the gathering of Korach, so it also means mitoch, amongst, when you talk about sanctifying God's name amongst the Jewish people. So the Gemara says, okay, so you told me amongst. Sanctification occurs amongst X, and that's connected to separate yourself from amongst these people. But how many people was that amongst that I should learn to this amongst? Okay? The Gemara says, Ibadelu bitoch edah ve'atya, now we learn edah. We learn another gzera shava, edah, the congregation, the gathering. Dichtivatam, it says, ad matai le'edah hara'a hazot. Until when is this terrible gathering, this evil gathering going to persist. Where is that talking about? That's talking about the Miraglim. The Miraglim, how many spies did the Jewish people send? 12. But it says the evil gathering. Of the 12 spies, which of them did the right thing? Joshua and Caleb. Those two did the right thing. That means that how many we left with? 10. So the evil gathering is how many? 10. If that's the case, if Edah means 10 by the spies, so when God said, separate yourself from this terrible gathering, Edah by Korach, it meant 10, right? 10 to 10. If I have Toch by Korach, and I have Toch by sanctifying God's name, so if this is 10, then this is 10, and if this is Toch, then that is Toch, and now I know that whenever I'm doing a sanctification of God's name, something which is Davar Shebikdusha, a matter of holiness, that requires 10 people to be in the presence of 10 people.
Does it say Toch by, or Edah by Yosef and the brothers? There he comes to us, and then they were a minyan of 10 together when they make the decree for him?
I don't remember seeing the word Edah there.
Edah.
Okay?
Usually, Gezerat Shavah, you can only learn
But now we got a double.
once, like that's taken off the board now.
What do you
Yeah,
mean
right?
once? You mean could we learn it in another way, or
Can't
could we
use
learn
the
it to a
same
certain
word
other
to
place?
to something else.
Technically, yes. You have to realize Gzerat Shavah is not something you could decide. It's from the Mesorah. So it was handed down, Halakha Moshe Misinai, to teach that we learn this from here. And right?
But if it's written Edah somewhere else, but it's talking about something totally different, you can't learn a Gezerat, or can you?
Only if there would be a Mesorah.
Okay.
Only if we would have a specific tradition to learn this Gzerat Shavah to that Gzerat Shavah. Okay, let's carry on. So the Gemara says, so now we understand that a thing which is considered Davash B'Kedusha requires 10. Now, what that actually includes in the Mishnah is very interesting. What would you say goes into that? Maybe Chazarat HaShatz, because that has Kedusha. Yeah? Maybe Porsin al HaShema, where you break up Shema, because that has the Kedusha of Kadosh, Kadosh, Kadosh. Right? In the blessings before Shema. That's sanctifying God's name. Maybe when you say Birkat Hamazon, Nevarech Eloheinu Shachalnu Mishelo, you're saying let's bless God's name, so you're sanctifying God's name. So some of these things are direct expressions of sanctifying Hashem's name. Birkat Kohanim.
Reading the Torah.
So one could argue that not every one of those is an example of this. So it's not clear, and the Rishonim actually argue on what we learn from this. Now that we have this rule, so what are we willing to learn? What's going to be part of that? And the Rishonim argue on exactly what's included. Okay?
We say Kadosh, Kadosh, Kadosh if we're praying Yachid. You don't say not Kedusha.
Machloket Rishonim.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So there's one opinion that you would not say the Kiddusha of the blessings before Shema without a minyan. Other opinions, which is what we hold like, say that you could say it.
Also Ba'al Tzion or separate, different one?
Ba'al Tzion, no. I don't think that there's a machloket there. Okay? Let's continue. But now, this would be the logic.
Don't pray at all.
But this would be the logic of it. You see? You see that?
Ever since the rabbi called me out, I've been here every morning.
Hazi. I'm hoping that at least the sachar that you get will make up for it.
Why can't you pray at home?
No, we're just saying that if you have a question of what you could say without, if you don't have a minyan, you can't say certain things, whatever, etc.
Oh, it's easy. Just say Birkot HaShahad, Amit Shema, and Amidah, and you're good.
You sound like a pro. Gotta work on that. Okay, let's go. All right. No, the camera's straight on me. The camera's straight. But I think you gave him away. I don't know if they could hear you. Okay, fine. Let's continue. The Gemara says as follows. We don't do the standing, sitting, eulogizing thing if you have less than 10. Now, can we all agree? This is for sure not included in the first Gemara. Right? There were many things in the Gemara that you could argue, oh, that's a davash b'kedusha, reading the Torah.
But this is not sanctification.
I didn't sanctify God's name, but maybe that's a holy thing, and then therefore it's considered, maybe because there's blessings, Baruch Atah Hashem Asher Bachar Banu, right? Maybe that's still a kedusha. So there's a lot of things in the Mishnah you could argue are part of the sanctification of God's name. Would you say that the eulogy thing is a sanctification? That's a davar shebekdusha?
If you say Baruch Dayan Ha'emed, you're praising Hashem. Then.
That would maybe be the birkat avelim.
Oh, not the eulogizing.
They're not the eulogizing, right? So at least there's some things that we still need to learn out that have a special limud to teach it to you. Kivan debay lemema, the Gemara says, this is a fascinating Gemara. Kivan debay lemema, the person who's running the funeral, he would say, Imdu yikarim amodu. Stand up, O you precious ones. Shivu yikarim shivu. Sit down, O you precious ones. But sirma asara lav orach ara. It's not the way of the world to be able to do this if there's not less than 10. Now, what exactly this means, we do not have a clear understanding. Why is it not the way of the world? Why did you need 10 people to have a moving funeral? Sit down, special one, sit down. Dear family members, please sit down. Dear family members, please rise. Why would you not say that less than 10? So if you look at it simply, maybe the answer is, it's just not something it's just not what's done. But you always have to ask the follow-up question. If that would be the right thing to do, then that would be what was done. So what does this mean? Lav orach ara. It's not the way that we do it. So Rashi actually says something very interesting. And there's one word in Rashi I want you to pick up on. You see Rashi is right smack in the middle of the page. Lav orach ara, not the way of the world. Latriach shaliach lekach, to bother the funeral master to do this. Ulekrotam yikarim, and to call them dear ones. De'imken ma henachta lemirubim. What?
There's only 3 people in the family.
Oh, 3 people in the family. We're not going to make the shaliach, bother. What? But then Rashi says something at the end. He kind of throws a hook. He doesn't say that, if there's not 3, it's not worth the effort. He says, because if you do that, ma hinachta lemirubin. What did you leave for the many?
Took him away from a bigger funeral? No.
No, that's not what he's saying. Ma hinachta lemirubin.
Oh, how could you call
Meaning,
it bigger,
what would you call a larger group?
more special?
Isn't that interesting? It's a tough thing to get your head around.
One more time.
Rashi, the way Rashi says it is that if you're going to say this for 3 people, okay, then what are you going to say for 10 people?
So you're devaluing the
So it's the word
benefit of a 10
yikarim?
by doing it for 3.
As if, but
Right.
not necessarily the benefit, but the wording of dear ones.
Yikarim.
Yikarim.
That's the issue.
Yeah. If you're going to use it, it's not that less than 10 are not yakar, but if you call less than 10 yakar, what would you call 10? Very yakar?
Why does there need to be a distinction between less or more?
That's the hard part to wrap your head around. And why is it demeaning to 10 to use the term that you used for 3? So it seems over here that the word yakar is not a reference to the people's character. It's not a reference to the size of their loss. It's a reference to the way we relate to the importance of the gathering that's sitting Shiva. That's the point. So you're calling them this important group, Yani. This important group of mourners. The importance comes from the fact that they're a large group. Look at how many people this person left behind him. He left behind him so many people who are mourning. They're called Yikarim. If you call 3 people Yikarim, then when you have a big amount of people, then you can't use the word Yikarim. Again, I'm not sure. Is there no other words you could use? That's the problem. We couldn't come up with another word. I don't understand. I'm being honest, I do not understand what Rashi is trying to say. Now, let me make it worse. If it's just a problem of vocabulary, then the first part of Rashi doesn't make sense.
We don't want to bother the shaliach.
You see, it's odd. It seems like Rashi is saying 2 different things. One is we have a vocabulary problem.
So it sounds insensitive.
The second thing is we have a bothering the shaliach tzibur problem. So which is it? What is it?
Does it show the importance to be at a funeral where we're not calling less than 10 yakar, so it would prove that it shows that much more what you need to go to a funeral to do a mitzvah, because we want you to be yakar. We're not calling less than 10.
So remember, we're not here talking, when we say yikarim, to everybody.
You're only talking to the mourners?
I think we're talking to the mourners.
How could that be in
Yeah, how could that be?
that's the right?
1 second.
Small family.
No, okay. Same way sometimes you don't have a minyan. It's not your fault that there's not a minyan.
Right.
But there's just laws that are appropriate only when there's a minyan. Yeah. Okay. So let's see. Well, maybe we'll understand more when the Gemara comes back to it, because we'll see in a second the Gemara is going to ask these questions. Okay? Let's continue. You don't say Birkat Avelim and Birkat Chatanim. My Birkat Avelim. The Gemara says, what does Birkat Avelim mean? Like we asked already earlier. What is this reference when we talk about Birkat Avelim in the Mishnah? The Gemara answers, Biracha Rechava, which means, like literally, it means a wide blessing. So what is this wide blessing that we're talking about? This expansive blessing. The Gemara says, excuse me, not the wide blessing. It means rechov, from the blessings that are said in the rechov, in the street. Okay? Now, which berachot are pronounced, which berachot are we going to say in the street? That's the beracha that happens before they get into the house. So which beracha is that? That's the beracha of 1 second. Rashi says,
Something about paying a reward.
yeah, but I thought I remember Rashi gave. Oh no, that the Rashi is on the next part of En Avelim and Aminyan. So there's a beracha that you say outside before the berachot of Nichum Avelim, and that is Mishalem Sachar. You know. That Baruch Dayan Emet is one part of it. The other part of it is Hamakom Yenachem Etchem, which is the consolation. So the beracha that happens outside, that's the beracha that we're talking about when we're talking about Birkat Avelim.
And you would need a minyan there.
And for that you need a minyan, yes.
This is the row of Tenachamuz. When you said the people line up.
No, because that's Tanchum Avelim. So this is Birkat Avelim, okay? Baruch Dayan Emet. Okay, now so there's the Dayan Emet beracha, and then there's also the Nichum Avelim beracha. Okay, so when they would have that first meal, when they would be eating outside, that would be part of this Birkat Avelim, and they would only make that beracha if there was a minyan. The Gemara continues and says, okay, Birkat Avelim. Damar Rav Yitzchak Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Birkat Avelim ba'asara. Birkat Avelim you say when there is 10, okay? The en Avelim in a minyan, but you don't count the Avelim as part of the minyan. So remember we said earlier that the question was whether or not the Avelim are counted. This is what I'm referring to. Rashi says, en Avelim in a minyan, shehareu omer beracha lemenachamim b'fnei atzmam, because you would say this blessing to the Avelim, okay? So you would say it directly to them. So they're not actually saying the blessing. So you can't count them as part of the minyan that's required to say the beracha. And what's the beracha? Achenu, our brothers, Ba'al gemul yishalem lachem gimulchem atov. The one who pays good reward, he's going to pay you a good reward. Baruch atah Hashem mishalem hagimul. Today, that beracha is not the beracha that we say. Today we say a beracha dayana emet, okay? V'la'avelim b'fnei atzman, and to the avelim themselves, achenu, they would say to themselves, achenu ba'al nechamot yenachem etchem, baruch atah Hashem menachem avelim, ve'eno kolelan yachad. And he doesn't count them, he doesn't count these together, okay? So you have these two things, you can't count the avelim as part of it because we're saying the beracha to them.
But the second one is the thing that the Avelim is the beracha that the Avelim say.
What do you mean?
Didn't you say at the end?
U'la'avelim b'fnei atzman.
Right, so that means that they say that. That means amongst themselves.
Amongst themselves, yes.
So that's something that they would say.
Yes.
Do they need a minyan to say that?
Yeah, but then they would count. That's what I'm saying, right? When they're participating, it makes sense that they count. When they're not participating, it doesn't make sense that they count.
Yeah, but sorry, my question is it just the Avelim or can other people count as well?
If they're not saying the beracha, then the same smara would apply in reverse.
That beracha is only for the Avelim to say?
That's yes. That's when they're saying it for themselves, then you don't count. And when you're saying it for them, right?
So then you need a minyan of 10 Avelim just to say that.
Correct.
Second beracha.
Yeah. Okay. Again, none of this is. We don't do any of this. Yeah. Okay. Says the Gemara. B'chat chatanim b'asara. The chatanim min minyan. The blessing of the chatanim, right, is 10. And the chatan he does count. Now the question is, if you didn't count the avelim, because they're not saying the beracha, why are you counting the chatan who's not saying the beracha?
He's sameach bih. He is involved in the bracha.
What do you mean?
That they're blessing him. He's involved in it. I guess he's also blessing the mourner at the same time.
No, it's the same, but it's the same berachot that he would say during the wedding, during the kiddushim part.
Let's say you have 9 people and the chatan, but we're saying the berachah to him. So therefore, the same way the mourners don't count on those berachot, the chatan should not count on this berachah. Forget besamim. No. The sheva berachot.
In the sheva berachot.
Why is he counted? Yeah.
What are the ones in the sheva berachot?
Yotzer Adam, Stasis, Sameach Tesamach, right, etc. Shakol Baruch Vodo. So the answer is that it's not just that you're saying or not saying the beracha, because there's many berachot that will be said in a minyan where not all 10 people are saying it together. But if, right, like as an example, you have the Chazan saying Amidah, we're saying Amen. We're not saying the beracha. So you hear to. The answer is that when you're saying it as a group of menachamim to the avelim, you're saying it as a group of menachamim. So there's 2 different groupings. When you're there as the chatan, everyone is part of the same group. So therefore the chatan could also be counted as part of the minyan. Is that clear? Yes?
Are you differentiating between we're sameach for the chatan? So aren't we a group that's happy for him? He's not in my group.
Yeah, yes, but it's also like as an example. Listen to one of the berachot. Sameach tesamach re'ei ma'ovim. Rejoice, right? Or beloved friends.
He can rejoice.
Right now, technically, the beracha is referring to the chatan and kala. But there's also halachot that involve the people that are part of the wedding. We don't say, what's it called? You don't say tahanun if we're part of, that group, because it's all part of one big simcha. But we're not separating ourselves from his simcha. We're being part of his simcha. We're not putting ourselves in the aveluts.
Okay.
Right? We're separate. We're consoling the mourners. So we're the group of people that are consoling the mourners. That's the group of mourners. So we would need to be 10. And if they would be making their own beracha, then they would also need to be 10. Okay?
So this is really just saying the significance of when 10 is needed.
Yeah.
Did we learn why it's 10? Is that because of the spies?
So we had the Gzerah Shavah that incorporated anything which was considered a sanctification of Hashem's name. This one, the eulogizing, one could argue maybe it's not.
No, did we get to 10? Did we learn why 10?
10 we learned from the Gzerah Shavah, from the spies to Korach, and from Korach to sanctification.
Okay, so that's how we get to 10.
But assuming this is not a sanctification thing, then we have no idea how we got to 10. So you're asking a very good question. Did you guys hear what Ray just asked?
Why 10 is a minion?
If it's part of the sanctification gambit, then we know that that's why it needs 10. Assuming it's not part of that, then why does it need 10, and what's the significance of 10?
Didn't we say that that these are the berachot that are in the Mishnah? It lists the categories.
Number,
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
why 10?
Yeah.
So then what's the question?
The question is, assuming this is part of the sanctification, circle, then that's how you got to 10. But if it's not part of that, so then where do we get? I understand the Mishnah is telling you that you must have 10, but we don't know why you need 10.
Don't.
Okay.
You hear that question?
Yeah, well, we were going through and saying, so we said earlier that some of the Berachot, you're praising Hashem.
Yeah.
And those are easily
categorized as V'nikdeshti, correct. What about the ones that are not?
We're working our way through those.
Right, so now he said, we just said it.
Minyan is 10 men.
We just did say it. We just said you need 10 for Nichum Avelim, for Birkat Avelim. You need 10 for Birkat Chatanim. So if that's the case, so then why do you need 10 for that?
I think he was saying, why is 10 the
Why
number?
do you need
Why is
10
the
in
magic
general?
number?
No, he's asked more sophisticated than that. I understand that 10 is a magic number when you have a magic number teller, which is the spies. But if you do not have the magic number teller, because you're not part of that circle, where did you get this idea that you need 10? Because what's the significance of 10 outside that circle?
I thought we learned that from Sodom, Abraham asking for 10 men.
We never brought that.
In another book. It may have.
Maybe, but again, you got to say that.
Okay. Got it.
Stick to one book.
Got to say that. And by the way, if that's where you learn the specification of 10, then why didn't the Gemara bring that for the Mishnah?
I was waiting for one of those.
Because that the Gezerah Shava is from you.
Sorry?
The Gezerah Shava, you learn 10 is minyan. We said from the spy, so they don't need
Yeah.
another place to
The
learn.
Gemara is assuming that we know why 10 already.
Correct.
Not what's the significance of 10 here. We're saying that we know that a minyan is considered 10.
No, Gemara didn't say anything like that.
No?
This is, when you talk about a minyan, this is a Mishnah that's talking about when you need a minyan,
A grouping, right?
right?
Proving grouping.
Now, by the way, as well, I don't know that Avraham Avinu's 10 would prove anything. What Avraham Avinu's proving is that to save a people, you need you need 10 good people to save a city. Who says that requirement, which is to save a city, and by the way, those are 10 tzaddikim, not 10 bodies. Right? That's not what we require for a minyan, 10 tzaddikim. Okay.
So the thing, Rabbi, the Mishnah doesn't actually say. It just says that these things are similar and these things you need a minyan. It doesn't say that they're sanctifying.
It doesn't
Hashem.
tell you, and that's why there's a machloket rishonim.
Right, but so
which ones of them are included, which ones are not.
But so where did we get the idea that these are only to sanctify Hashem from the Gezerah Shava?
Where do we get the
It's
idea
off.
that these are sanctification of God's name?
Yeah, maybe these things they're all similar and they sanctify. Maybe they're
Some of them are obviously part of it.
no, but forget about that.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't say in the Mishnah that that the reason why these are together.
Doesn't say which are which.
No, but it doesn't say that we're doing that these are together because they're sanctifying Hashem.
Correct. Doesn't say that.
So maybe it's to learn something else.
It leaves you to figure that out. So that's why there's a machloket rishonim. Right? The other rishonim are arguing and they're saying, look, I get that they're all together, but not all of them are. And then the other rishonim say, no, this one yes, this one not. Right? So that's where it's a little bit of a sticky wicket because we don't know what to do with the ones that aren't part of V'nikdeshti and how you got to 10, which is really Ray's question. Okay? Let's come back to this. Says the Mishnah, the Gemara, ואין עבדים מן המניין, ברכת חתנים מעשרה, וחתנים מן המניין. The חתנים are part of the 10. ואין מזמנין על מזון בשם פחות מעשרה. You don't do zimun with God's name, without 10's name, without 10 people there. כיוון דבאי למאמר נברך לאלוקינו, בציר מעשרה, לאו אורח חרא. Since you must say Elokeinu, right? You have to welcome God into the zimun, right? If you're going to have 10 people, if you want to say Elokeinu. So you're not going to do that because lav orach ara, it's not the way of the world. It's not proper to do that unless you have a minyan. Now here already, lav orach ara makes a lot more sense. You don't call God to a meeting with one guy. Right? Imagine I called the chief rabbi to come and say, please come say a few words to the synagogue. And one guy showed up. Chutzpah. Right? So there needs to be a minimal amount of people. And what's that minimal amount generally in Judaism is a minyan.
Nivarech she'achalnu means blessed that we ate.
Nivarech she'achalnu mishalo. Blessed is he that we ate from his.
And then when we say Nivarech,
Nivarech Elokeinu, let's bless our God she'achalnu mishalo. If you're mentioning God's name, so then in order to mention God's name, you better have a minyan there. It's not kavod for God. But look at, we use the same word, orach ara, which means the way of the world. Remember before we said the guy with the stop and go funeral? It's not orach ara to say dear ones if they're less than 10. Now, maybe what we learn from here and there is that something which is important has like a requirement to be considered an important gathering. What would that be in order to say God's name? 10 people. So maybe that's what it means when it says Shaliach Tzibur. We're not going to make him say Yekarim, special ones. Now, I have a theory. I don't have a proof to this theory, but I have a theory that to explain what the Gemara means. The theory is like this. This idea of stopping and going and stopping and going and stopping and going, as opposed to just having a funeral and taking the guy and burying him.
You don't
That-
want him to leave so fast.
That definitely is true. But the fact that we're now making that dependent on the minyan,
Gaining
what do
followers as we
you,
stop.
why is that relevant? So if that's the answer, that would be true always.
Right.
So here's what I'm thinking. The point of the reason why we stop and go is out of kavod for the people who are at the funeral or who are at the mourners. So the kavod for them is that you don't just rush through it. Look, because we have such a kahal kadosh over here, we're not just going to do the thing. We're going to give them the time to mourn, to sit, to stand, to spread out the funeral. When it's less than that, so this is not such a important gathering that we have to make the extra effort for them.
The guy who mooted.
Sorry?
He's saying it's not worth the extra effort for the guy who's sitting in the.
So you're raising an amazing question, and I will refer you to the Gemara in Sanhedrin, where the Gemara asks a big question. When you make a funeral, who is the kavod for? The dead person, the dead or the living?
The living, no?
So the Gemara has a whole question about this.
Wow.
Who's the kavod for?
You said before the opposite.
The language of the Gemara,
The way the rabbi's phrasing it, you're celebrating the life of
the
the
language of the Gemara is Yikra dechaye or Yikra demete. Is the funeral, is the eulogies, is the crying, is that for to honor the living or to honor the dead? And there's a whole Gemara over there figuring out whether it's whose honor it is. The Gemara's example is very interesting because you had a king, and the king died. The king who died was a tremendous rasha. The son, who was Avel, was a tremendous tzaddik. So now the question is, how do we behave at a funeral like
If you
this?
go to
Very
a funeral,
interesting.
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
So that's the Gemara in Sanhedrin.
TLDR, what's the answer?
Sorry?
TLDR, too long, don't read. What's the answer?
TLDR is that there's different parts that are, one part of it is considered halakha l'maaseh, is considered the honor of the dead, and one part's the honor of the living. So we divide specific parts. Some of the parts are for the living, and some of the parts are for the dead, and therefore the funeral represented both of those elements for the parts that are for the
I
living.
feel like the funeral is for the living and the sitting is for the dead.
But you could argue also the opposite,
Can argue
because the
the
sitting really helps the process also. Okay, let's see if we can. I just want to finish to the Mishnah because we like to finish each part. The Gemara says, why? Because lav or achar. It's not respectful to God to call God down nevarech Elokeinu when there's not a minyan. The Mishnah says, hakarkaot tish'av v'kohen ve'adam kiyotze behem. When you're having this appraisal, you need a minyan with a kohen. Minah, how do we know? Amar Shmuel, asara kohanim ketuvim parasha. 10 Kohanim are written in the parasha. What does that mean? It's not talking about 10 different Kohanim, but rather it means that the word Kohen in the parasha of Arachin, when you establish the value of the land or of the person, it mentions the word Kohen 10 times. Chad legufeh, one time references the Kohen himself, because one of them has to be for the Kohen. And V'idach, we're skipping those two words, V'idach, according to some of the opinions, V'idach and the rest, the other 9, Havi mi'ut achar mi'ut. They are an exclusion after exclusion. So in other words, what we're saying is that the first time you said a Kohen and that says not a Yisrael. But the next 9 times that you said it, it's like a double negative. It's like it cancels each other out, telling you that the other 9 don't have to be Kohanim. Ve'en mi'ut achar mi'ut el rabot. You don't have a negative after a negative unless it's 2 negatives making a positive. Don't not stand up, tells you stand up, okay? So therefore, only a Kohen, and then only and only, if it's only on an only, that tells you the other 9 are a mi'ut derabah lerabot. So therefore, Tish'ai Yisraelim, 9 people who are non-Kohens, V'chad Kohen, and 1 who's a Kohen. The Gemara says, V'hem ha'chamisha Kohanim v'chamisha Yisraelim. Why, once you have a mi'ut, right? So who said it's negative, 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 negative. Maybe it's negative, negative, net equals positive. Negative, negative, net equals positive. What that means is that in each set of two, you have one negative and one positive. So who told you to have a mi'ut achar mi'ut to cancel out and give you 9 non-Kohanim? Maybe it's each set of two, it's giving you one Kohen and one mi'ut, which is a non-Kohen. Maybe it's 5 and 5. The Gemara says, Kasha. It's a good point that you're making. We don't know why the halacha is this way. It could have gone either way, but this is the tradition that we have, that it's 9 and 1. Sorry?
Kasha. Open it.
Kasha, we'll leave it. The Gemara says, Ve'adam ki yotze bahen. By the way, can I just...
This is another.
What's my answer? What would be my answer to this Gemara's question?
Why 9 plus 1?
Why 9 and 1 and not 5 and 5?
Because it's
Oh, it's very hard to get 5.
Let's say that's not the problem.
Okay.
Because we would just tell you that you had to, and then you'd wait till you got it to make the assessment.
Do we need to see the text where it's written to understand that?
No. In other words, the Gemara is asking a value judgment.
one Kohen?
You have Kohen, and we're saying that Kohen is effectively saying not Israel. So the first time I understand that means Kohen. But then if you say again not, then that means a double negative, right? So then yes. But the question of the Gemara is, who said it means that? Maybe we look at each of these as a pair, and one yes and one negative gives it. But then we get to the next one and we do it again. So that lands up with 5 Kohanim and 5 Yisraelim. So the Gemara says Kasha, yeah? He was
I
first.
was going to point to you. I promise.
Yeah?
That's a good
What do you got? What do you got?
So I got this. There's a lot more Yisraelim than Kohanim. You gotta spread it around.
Gotta spread the love, Ray wants to say. Okay. I'm trying to answer what the Gemara says Kasha. I'm trying to answer. I think I have an answer.
Brooklyn, there's 100 minyanim.
What I want to do is the Gemara's trying to say we hold you have to have 1 and 9. The Gemara says maybe you have to have 5 and 5. So there's a general rule. You know what the rule is? Hamotzi mechavero alav haraya. You know what that means? Let's say I say that yarmulke that Ray is wearing, it's really mine. Where does the burden of proof lie?
With you.
With me. Why? Because he has it. If I'm trying to take something from you, now what happens if you say the same about my kippah? Then the burden of proof is on you.
Yeah, totally. Prove it.
The Gemara over here just said that we have a double negative. So there's 2 ways to learn it. Either the minimally difficult way, which is 9 Yisraelim, which there are more of, and 1 Kohen, or 5 and 5. And you know what? I don't know how to prove one way or the other. But if you want to make it more difficult, you prove it.
I love that.
That would be my answer to the Gemara.
9 plus 1 is the easy way out.
9 plus 1 is the easier way out. You want to tell me, well, but maybe you should learn it the other way and require 5 Kohanim. Okay, maybe. But if I can't prove it and you can't prove it, which way do we go? With the easier one.
Leave it alone. Yeah.
Leave this one alone.
I feel like that's impossible.
What?
They can't leave anything alone.
Right, but you see the Gemara did it. The Gemara says, "Ve'adam ki yotzeh behen." And this is not only true about the karka, it's also true about the man. If a man says, I'm sanctifying myself, the Gemara says, Adam mikadosh. Could a guy say, I'm sanctifying myself for the Beit HaMikdash? The Gemara says, no. When he's saying, my value is kadosh to the temple. Titania, because we learned in the Beit HaMikdash. If someone says, take my value for the temple, for the Beit HaMikdash, they evaluate him like he's a slave, like he's a worker. Ve'eved itkish lekarkaot. And a servant, we know a servant is considered and compared to the laws regarding karka, which is the laws regarding ground. Dichtiv, because it says, that when it comes to a servant that a person has, so the person would transfer from the father to the son, like you would transfer the land, which was that was owned by the father would go to the sons. So since we have a connection between karka, between land and the eved, so therefore, since we're categorizing the value of the man like an Eved, and the land required 9 plus 1 or 5 plus 5, but we wound up with 9 plus 1. So therefore also the value of the person, which is decided like an Eved, would also be learned 9 plus 1 or 5 plus 5, which we go with 9 plus 1. Baruch Adonai Le'olam.